Mom, I'm on TV. It's live.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Dominic Francis. How are you today?
I've got a bit of a buzz on at the moment because I have been sick and not eating. And when you have one or two drinks, you get a bit of a buzz.
I love that. A cheap shout.
So I feel great.
What are you drinking?
I'm having cucumber, gin, and tonic.
Lovely. That is good. It's actually healthy for you. I decided.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ling. It's great for the tummy. Kate, how are you, more importantly?
I'm pretty well, considering. I have just returned. I've just returned from the 25th annual Victorian Teachers Games, which I explained in the last episode, that it's basically schoolies, which is, for those who are outside of Australia, is it's your end of high school party. Everybody travels somewhere and drinks and has a time. For teachers, we have our schoolies, which is the Victorian Teachers Games, and it is, well, it can be however you decide, but with my particular group of friends, it is brutal. So you sign up for sports. So you have to run around and do things. But then, in addition to that, there are evening events that you can sign up for. And then after that, there are venues that are reserved just for the people attending the teachers' games. So it's a huge party. I have been more social in the past 3 days than I have been all year. So it is quite the recovery process. So my friend Jess, who came with me, she sent a text to our group this morning, which summed it up. She said, why does it feel like I've been body slammed into the concrete? And that is exactly how it feels. My entire body is sore. My liver will take some time to recover, but I came away with a bronze medal in trivia. I came away with a silver medal in beach volleyball, which was extremely controversial. We lost by a point. Not happy about that. But we managed to bring home the gold in AFL 9s, and I kicked 4 goals in the final game. So I was thrilled.
Hey, you're a superstar. Like,
hey, thank you.
We're in the presence of serious teacher goldness and fame. So stardom, may I say.
I should have brought my medals on so that I could have clinked them together, because that was our thing. When you win a medal, you have to wear it the whole time. You get a fine if you don't wear your medals. The only time you can take them off is in the shower or in bed. So yeah, you have to wear them at all times. So we clinked around Geelong for 3 days, which was fantastic.
Kate, can I please request that you post an Instagram story of you with all your medals on?
Absolutely. I have a few of them. So I can certainly do that. In fact, I'll post one of I'll get permission, but I'll post one of myself and my friend Jess, who I was with, where we were in the alleyway of drag bingo, dancing and clinking our medals. So it's quite a good one. I'll check if she's comfortable with that, and I'll throw that up. Otherwise, I will have photos galore.
Do you remember the name of the drag artist? Just wondering.
I do not. There was 2. We had 2 of them. I've got photos. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to look up who it was. My faculties weren't totally available at the time, so my memory's a little patchy here and there. But I will. I'll certainly endeavour to try and find out who the artists were. They were fantastic.
Oh, good. All right, folks. A bit of housekeeping before we kick off on Kate's story this week. A few things. First of all, we are, which we've talked about a few times now, but I just want to ramp you all up. On the 1st of October, we are participating in a month-long special, Halloween special, where we are focusing in on the Bridgewater series, and 8 total podcasts are doing one mega story, and Shit and Bricks is very excitedly part of that cohort. We're not episode 1. First episode will be released on the 1st of October, so please listen out for where to go listen to the first part of an 8-part series. You are going to be spoiled for choice, folks. I cannot tell you how amazing this month of Halloween is going to be. So listen out for that. Secondly, Kate, Patreon. We just recorded another special episode for our very select few Patreons. So if you're not a patron already, please go head out. It's in all of our links and socials and stuff like that. You can donate just even a small amount of money per month, and you get all this cool bonus content. It's hilarious, it's fun, and it keeps the lights on. So please go head over there to go check it out. And then lastly, Kate, we're bringing back the ever exciting BooPod Network shout out for the week.
Awesome.
And this week we are starting alphabetically because you know how much I love to do alphabets.
Yep.
It's the most indiscriminate way of picking people.
I love to do alphabets. Hi, I'm Dominic. I love alphabets.
It's a turn on for me. But this, we are showcasing the Generally Spooky podcast, which is Ailey and Kieran, and they're in Scotland, or based in Scotland, and the premise for their podcast is doing amazing, cool folklore and paranormal stories that's based in Scotland. So it's quite a specific niche, you know, bucket of stories, but who knew Scotland could be so fucking scary, Kate? It is. Haunted as fuck.
All the sheep.
Yeah. And killed.
I don't know what that has to do with anything, but, you know, I know things about Scotland.
So we're going to play their trailer for you in a few seconds. Please go check them out. They are also part of the Halloween Bridgewater series special this coming October. But go check them out. They're amazing. They're really funny, and they've got great accents, and their stories are stuff that you normally would not hear. So here is the trailer for Generally Spooky Podcast.
Boop, boop, boop.
Boop, boop, boop. Oh, Kate, aren't they amazing and sweet?
They are the cutest little buttons. It's very
right,
cool.
Kate.
It's nice to have people back.
Right. It's nice to promote others, and they are so lovely. They promote us all the time, so it's only fair that we do it back. But Kate, I know you're in recovery mode.
Yes, I am. If I lose my voice throughout this, don't be shocked, but I will do my very best.
It's hot, Kate. I love it when you're croaky.
Oh, thank you.
But you're the narrator for this week's episode, so what are we talking about?
Well, if you've clicked on this, you may be aware that this episode this week is called Claustrophobia No.1. Now, as I was going through and writing this story for today, I found one example, and it is a very well-known story, and you may have heard it before, and that's okay, because it's good for us to, you know, go over these things and be frightened. And I hadn't gone into as much detail with this story myself, so I enjoyed writing it, and hopefully you enjoy listening to it. But we are focusing on the story of John Jones, who had an unfortunate incident in the Nutty Putty Cave. So you might have, you know, heard of the Nutty Putty Cave before. I had an unfortunate incident in my...
I kind of love the name Nutty Putty.
My Nutty Putty Cave was in distress last weekend, I'll tell you that much. Oh, guys, here's a hot tip for you. Don't order the Greek feast at the Burvale Hotel. In fact... Don't order a Greek feast anywhere but a Greek restaurant, is my opinion. I would guess after that.
Fair.
But all shitting myself stories aside, this story, I discussed how, you know, being awake in a coma, being, you know, aware, was probably my worst fear. This is really close as a second. This whole story is super duper close as a second worst case scenario for me. So I'm going to dive into it. But please, Dom, I encourage you to jump in with any little tidbits, jokes, whatever you like to lighten it up. I've taken an article from Lindsay Whitehurst, who wrote this article for the Salt Lake Tribune, originally published in 2018, updated in 2019. There are two parts to this story, so I've taken, you know, most of what I've written here from that, but I have edited a little bit because I was saying to Dom before we started recording, it is an incredible article, and it is very personal. So there's in the sense that there are a lot of, anecdotal stories about the people involved and the people around John Jones it was actually quite emotional. When I was reading it, I really felt for the people in the story. So I did take a little bit of that out of it, just so that I could get through this without crying, to be honest. So if you do want to go ahead and read it, we can post the link for the original articles, part 1 and part 2. But yeah, this will tell you the story in an incredible way. So shout out to Lindsay Whitehurst. Thank you for sharing this on the Salt Lake Tribune. Are we ready?
Kate, can I interject real quick?
Of course,
please. It's kind of like, you know how you did an episode on Old Mate 127 Hours, and
yes,
it's not quite claustrophobia, it was more of a survival story, but it's no secret that my compassion for this fella in 127 Hours, I've forgotten his name because I've blocked it from my memory.
Yeah.
But my level of compassion for him was pretty low because of some of the stupid decisions that he made, both before, during, and after. But it's almost like this story, which I'd never heard before. I've never heard of Nutty Putty Cave. I am quite a caving enthusiast. Never heard of John Edwards Jones or John Edwards.
Jones, yeah.
But it's almost like, so I had no compassion for Old Mate 127 Hours. This is the complete opposite. It's it's a bit heart-wrenching.
It is. So yeah, as I said, if you do want to have a look and have a little bit of a tear in the eye, certainly go and read the original article. But yes, I've edited a bit just to try and keep with our tone a little bit more as well, because I would find it hard pressed to be cracking some serious jokes with this particular story. So if I take a bit of that out of that, it's not going to seem so completely fucking heartless that we're like, when
I mean, even with the name of Nutty Putty, like the jokes write themselves.
Well, that's it, exactly. So we'll see how we go through this, but it's quite the story. So I'm going to dive in, so to speak. We're starting off on a really strong note. Woo! Crawling on her belly, Susie Mortolas inched her way through a cramped limestone tunnel that wound through the earth like the path of a worm. The search and rescue team volunteer sweated in 70-degree heat, stifling humidity, her clothes covered in a soft brown clay. This unmapped passage of Utah County's Nutty Putty Cave was no wider than the opening of a washing machine. So first and foremost, that's horrendous. And Susie had ropes tied around her ankles so other rescuers could pull her out if she got stuck. 20 minutes passed before the beam of her headlamp fell upon a pair of navy and black running shoes sticking out of a narrow crevice at the tunnel's end. "Hi, John. My name's Susie. How's it going?" The reply seemed to come from the other end of a long hallway. "Hi, Susie. Thanks for coming, but I really, really want to get out," said 26-year-old John Jones. He was trapped nearly upside down. I know, same. "Hi, thanks for coming." "Hi,
by the way.
Oh, I'd love to get out of here if you wouldn't mind.
Would you mind? Can't go round. Got a great shot of my ass. Please,
John,
get me out of here.
He's in there and he's trapped. He's almost upside down. His 6 foot, 200-pound body seemingly swallowed by the rock. So John is not a small guy. 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. What's pounds to? That's like nearly 100 kilo, right?
I'll find out for you.
I think it's like almost half, like 110, 120 kilo perhaps. But he's basically been swallowed by this rock. So all that you can see are his shoes, essentially. 90 kilos, perfect. So he's 90 kilos, 6 foot tall, and he's been swallowed by a rock. Above John, Susie's slight 5'3" frame was also encased. She couldn't fully extend her arms and legs, but she was confident. Amongst the smallest of the dedicated band of search and rescue volunteers in rugged Utah County, Susie couldn't carry the biggest packs and she got cold faster, but she was a caver and a good one at that. She knew Nutty Putty and she could go where others could not. Susie, had been moving into a new house, but she dropped everything when her rescue pager went off just after 9 p.m. She drove her Toyota 4Runner, purchased with the eye towards rescues, around the southern end of Utah Lake and down the long, dark dirt road leading to the cave. Susie met with 2 other rescuers and descended into the cave through a rocky hole at the top of a large hill in the West Desert. They traversed its chambers for about 30 minutes before reaching the 135-foot tunnel where John was stuck. So imagine doing anything for 30 minutes. That's 1/3 of the film Awake, which you forced me to watch today. And that was painful enough. But 30 minutes of crawling through a hole the size of a washing machine that's not a fun activity for me. And I would not like to be invited to do that, just as a heads up. If anyone was thinking of inviting me, I can't come that day. I'm busy.
You have to think of oxygen. You have to think of heat. You have to think of the staleness of it all, the silence of it all, right?
It's just, it's horrendous. But Susie went in first and she reached John at 12:30 a.m. Okay, so keep that time in mind, because Susie's going down there to say, "G'day, John." After, quite some time has passed, she got the beeper call at 9 p.m. So this is, 3.5 hours since she got the beeper call. She's a rescuer, so he has to have been in there before as well. Now, he had been stuck for more than 3 hours. He had one arm bent underneath his chest and the other was forced backwards.
Oh.
So he doesn't have his arms in front of him. One of them's beside him and one's underneath his chest. So his calves were free, but they were useless. So that's it, just his calves. So John said, "Hey, Suze, thanks so much for popping by." And she responds, she says, "No worries, John. You're going to be out of here lickety-split." But as she tied a webbed rope into a lover's knot around his ankle, she realized that bringing John out of the cave was going to be like swimming backwards against a very strong current. Caver Dale Green discovered Nutty Putty in 1960, and he named it after the clay that he found in much of its 1,400 feet of chutes and tunnels. Imagine being the first one to discover this. And in 1960, the equipment's probably a bit different. Like, why?
Yeah.
The people are wired differently. This we are fully aware of after 47 episodes of this. People are wired differently. To see a cave and go, "I'm going to go in there. I'm just going to pop in there and have a wiggle around."
I think it's that explorer sort of mentality of no one's ever done this. Climbing Mount Everest, swimming across something, or going to the North Pole or South Pole or whatever. And the fact that people did it with such archaic material and equipment, but it's not so much that was the challenge. It was also the fact that no one had ever done this before. And you're like, God, you got to be ballsy as fuck.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that. You got to have guts to be able to do that.
For sure.
And I don't know of many stories of that any longer. Like, when's the last time a human has done something that's like not been done before?
Yeah, it's getting harder. Yeah,
it's like people can do it quicker and faster and blah blah blah, whatever.
That could be why space is like that thing, because it's so hard. They're like, space is the vibe. Let's try and crack that, because a lot of the stuff on Earth has kind of been done. So let's try space or the deep ocean. Now, back at the Nutty Putty, thousands of people, they've explored this cave, and it was once so popular that a line would actually form at the entrance. So people would line up to get into this place. So it's not like it's uncharted territory. There's, people are aware of this tunnel. They know what it's like. They know the chambers, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, John went into the cave on November 24th, 2009 with 10 other friends and family members. Very good step. This is the complete opposite to 127 Hours Cowboy, who decides to go by himself. John's gone with 10 other friends. Now, this excursion was organized by his brother, Josh. It was their first time in Nutty Putty, and it was a throwback to childhood family caving outings. So they have been caving as a family before. So it's not like this is brand new. John hadn't gone into a cave for years, but the two brothers met for Thanksgiving at their, parents' house, which was nearby. John was by then attending medical school in Virginia, and he lived with his wife, Emily, and their 1-year-old daughter, Lizzie. Their second child was due in June. The group entered the cave around 8 p.m. Now, when I read that, I was like, why are we doing activities at 8 p.m.? But then I realized it's super dark in a cave, so it doesn't really matter. What time's like, oh, we're going to get there when it's dark. Yeah, have you been inside? Not much different. So they entered at 8 p.m. and they explored a large chamber called the Big Slide. Fun.
Love it.
Before John and Josh broke off with two other friends to find a challenge, a tight but navigable passage called the Birth Canal.
Mm-hmm.
They split up, wriggling into alcoves and passages to look for it. Okay, so they're looking for this specific canal, or this section called the Birth Canal. Now, John picked a waist-high hole to explore. So he's like, where am I going? This looks good. In I pop. Off he goes. He was wearing a rainbow-coloured 1970s style caving headlamp that his dad bought for him for the family trips when he was a kid. He went in head first, pushing himself along with his hips and his stomach and his fingers. I've got problems with all of that, but whatever. John's in there. He's caving. Other cavers exploring this hole had found that only the nimblest of contortionists could navigate its tight corkscrew of rock. John found no place big enough to turn his body around and leave the tunnel. So 6 foot, 200 pounds, 90 kilos. This is already, concerning, I would say.
Yeah, my stomach literally just turned in knots.
Yeah.
As you described that scenario. And I've done a lot of caving, Kate, so I'm familiar with I'm genuinely being transported back to some of those scenarios where an instructor or whatever is like leading you and going, don't trust your eyes right now. Know the fact that this is doable and your body is able to contort in this way. So,
I don't like that. Why
but
do you...
I know that feeling.
Oh, Dom, I can't. Oh, so in addition to being an Alphabet fan, you're also a spelunker?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Your resume, it's really just developing.
I've got a story to tell you at the end of this episode, which will just fucking shit your pants. But
perfect. Bring it on. Second time this week. Okay, so now John kept going. So he thought he was in the birth canal section, which was mapped, and that's something that people had gone into before. Now, when he saw a fissure. Okay, fissure. It dropped nearly straight down in front of him. It may have appeared wider at the bottom, which would have given him a spot to turn around.
Yeah.
Rescuers believe that John sucked in his chest to navigate and investigate that fissure, sliding his torso over the lip of the rock and down into the 10-inch wide side of the crevice. But when his chest expanded again, he was stuck.
Yeah.
Struggling to free himself only made John slide deeper into the narrower 8.5-inch wide side of the fissure.
Yeah.
So, that 2 inches counts, that 1.5 inches, like you can only imagine. Like I'm thinking of a Subway sandwich now. That's 12 inches. It's a foot long. That is not enough for me to put my body into. I mean, I'll put it in my body, but I won't put my body into a space that big. Like that's bonkers.
Yeah.
Now one arm's pinned underneath him and the other forced backward by an outcropping of rock. So he's kind of slid down and his arm's kind of caught. So it's pushed beside him and the other one's underneath him. His rainbow headlamp bounced off. Instead of widening so John could get out, the crack narrowed and all but closed. Could you imagine that? You get stuck and then your headlamp falls off and thinking it might fall into a section where you're like, oh, sweet. Like I can just try and slide down there further and then turn around. There's nothing there. It just basically closes. And you're like, oh, drats. I think I've made a boo-boo here.
This is as far as I can go.
This is it. This is it. Now, when 23-year-old Josh learned that his brother was stuck, he thought it was the beginning of another family adventure story. Their father had once gotten briefly stuck between two rocks when they were kids, and that became like a family story for them. So they were like, oh, silly John, we're going to be able to talk about this later. Now,
look, props to not panicking.
No.
Like, in all honesty, because the thing that I've always been taught when I've gone caving, and granted, it's been a few years, so I don't know, maybe there's been breakthroughs in the world of caving, but I don't think there is, because the basic rule is just panicking is the worst thing that you could possibly do.
Absolutely.
Raising your heart rate, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, increasing how much you're breathing, like everything like that. It's just, yeah, it's the worst. Now, Josh has wound through the tunnel. He was crab crawling feet first between the cramped muddy walls. So he's kind of going in backwards, I guess. Yeah. But as he's going in there, he was feeling a bit of a apprehension. And then he reached the corkscrew and he got stuck himself. But then he could see his brother, and then dread settled in. Seeing his feet and seeing how swallowed he was by the rock, that's when I knew it was serious. Josh said it was really serious. Josh managed to work his way free, thankfully. He wrapped his feet around John's calves and he pulled. So he's trying his best to, do whatever he can. Now, John's body did inch up, but because he's got nothing to hold on to and his arms aren't free, he slipped back into the crevice as soon as Josh released him.
Yeah.
So he would come up a little bit and then slip back in as Josh released him, which that would probably be worse. I don't know. Like just moving up a little bit, sort of feeling that sense of relief, and then straight away going back in. Yeah. So now, caving made Josh feel like an explorer, finding something truly new in alien depths, like you were saying. It's that explorer mentality. But now he felt powerless and overwhelmed. His older brother was helpless in a dark hole. He knew that they needed a search and rescue team. So Josh crawled his way back up to the surface and he called 911 whilst a friend went into the tunnel to stay with John. Now, keep in mind, it takes like 20, 30 minutes to get to where John is.
Yeah.
So that's not like a quick, I'll just pop outside, call the rescue team, get them back in here. It's a hassle to get out and get back in again. So, if we're talking that Josh has gone out, John is upside down. He's head first in this tunnel, and it's another half hour for someone else to come back down. So, you're talking 45 minutes of being upside down. If I bend over and get up too quick, I'm in a world of trouble. But this is someone who is like, everybody has at one point been upside down in their life. Like, you can't do it for very long. You get the head spins.
Not good for the body.
No, everything rushes into your head. It doesn't feel good. So, keep that in mind as we're sort of going on and talking about poor John here. Now, knowing that help was on the way, it steeled Josh for another trip down the tunnel to take his friend's place. The brothers made small talk to take their minds out of the cave. They talked about Josh's girlfriend and whether he should follow John into medical school. After almost an hour, Josh heard rescuers were at the cave's entrance and he went to find them. I didn't want to leave him, he said. His whole life was in that cave, in that tiny little crack. But John told his brother it was okay to leave. He said, "Go get him, brother." And then Josh went up to go and get the rescuers.
I have to give massive props. So far, people keeping their head cool. I know we're talking about a retelling of a story, but even Suze and John and the lightheartedness, like I bet your bottom dollar, Kate, like some of the times that I've been in shitty or high stress environments, I always crack a joke to just lighten the mood. I don't know why. Definitely. I'm just that person, but I have the power of, and it's why we do this podcast, Kate, the power of just trying to lift the spirits and what that can do for your, your psychology of,
definitely
can make a huge difference.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. It's like, we say, I say in life all the time, but particularly when you're with a group of teachers, as you often say, you have to laugh or you'd cry. Yeah. There's so many things you come across that, you just have to laugh about it, because otherwise you'd find yourself really, quite upset. So I think it's that sort of situation. Now, the original article, I just want to mention, they do go into a lot about John and Josh and his family, part of the Mormon church, and faith is a very important part of their life. And that was a big part of this whole rescue process as well. Now, I didn't take it out because I didn't want to talk about it. I just took it out for the sake of keeping the story, under 2 hours, because there's quite a lot in there. So again, that is a really big part of it is his faith and that connection he does make with rescuers and other people there as well. But his family, a lot of singing hymns, a lot of praying. It was a big part of this rescue as well. So again, I didn't take it out because I didn't want to sort of talk about it, but I thought I'd mention it And when you go back to read the article, there's a lot of detail about that, about what they were singing and talking about as well. Now, the human body is designed to walk upright. There you go. Facts. Don't say I didn't teach you anything. The heart, it works with the force of gravity, not against it. So if you're upside down, the heart is going to struggle because it doesn't work that way. You should be upright. Now, when rescuers told a trauma physician, his name was Doug Murdoch, that John was nearly upside down, he knew that the trap man didn't have much time. Being upside down, your body has to plump. Your body needs to be plump. No, your body has to pump the blood out of the brain all the time. This is Dr. Murdoch. He said your body isn't set up to do that. The entire system will start to fail. So Dr. Murdoch heads to the scene knowing that blood and fluids would be pooling in John's brain and lungs. His circulation would be slowing, capillaries leaking, toxins building up in his blood. If the rescuers were to free John, those toxins can rush to his heart and kill him. Yeah. So we're now in a different set of circumstances. Not only is he stuck in there, but the position he's in is making it really dangerous to then pull him out quickly. And then if they chucked him upright, that would be fatal, could potentially be fatal. Now, there are very few studies about the long-term effects of being upside down, but Murdoch thought that John might have 8 to 10 hours to live. So he's, by this point, he's already been in there for 4, let's say. Like it's certainly been 3. It could be even longer, 4 or 5 hours. Now, Suze, bless you. Susie knew what it was like to be alone in the darkness at Nutty Putty Cave. She, in fact, had been stuck once when she curled into a ball to turn around and she found that she was not able to move her legs. She couldn't hear her group. She started to panic, and then she started to tell herself, you need to breathe. Millimeter by millimeter, she pushed her legs out behind her until she was free. Inside the tunnel, Susie tried everything she could think of to free John. She helped string a rope from John back to the rest of the team in the open pit at the tunnel's entrance. The team pulled, but they didn't have enough power to move John, and the friction of the rope rubbing on the stone was too strong. Susie helped him to shift positions, but she couldn't lift him. She stretched a water bottle down to his right arm, the one that was forced backwards, so that he could try and tip the bottle forward. The water flowed down his arm in the hopes that some would eventually get to his mouth so he could try and, drink a little bit. Now, I'll explain a little bit more as we get into the rescue portion of it, as I start to ramp up the rescue efforts. But we will post some pictures in our socials because there's a really great image of what this looks like. So it's not just, a cave that kind of goes straight down. There's not just a straight plateau and then John's stuck in, the part that goes down. It kind of is like, the way that I looked at it, it's a little bit like if the stock market's going really well for a bit, it kind of peaks into, but then there's a big fucking crash and the stock market plummets. It kind of looks like a graph. So it's got, like an apex, and then it goes down a little bit more, and then there's the sharp incline. So there's a bit to deal with. It's not just a straight line that they can run a rope pulley system. There's a lot of different aspects of this cave to try and contend with. So it's not an easy rescue at the best of times. Now, Susie also tried to cut off John's jeans to try and free up a few inches, and then she joked that she'd have to tell this story to his wife and asked if he'd like to get some pancakes when they got out. So Susie's trying to keep it light. She's cutting off his jeans and going, oh, you should buy me dinner first. Oh, should we get some pancakes? Like, I really love that. She's trying to keep his spirits up and trying to do absolutely everything that she can. Like, she's just she's a credit to this whole rescue effort. Now, as John spoke, his voice grew more nasal and his breathing was a lot more labored, so she could hear that his lungs were filling with fluid. So as he's talking, it's starting to sound a bit, Time slips by strangely underground, and Susie only had a vague notion of its passing. Only her headlamp lit the cave's absolute darkness. The only sounds were those that the rescuers made. After about 2 hours, Susie had tried everything she knew, and she crawled back out for another rest, and then another rescuer popped down and took her place. In the meantime,
she needs to rest too.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Well, if you think about it too, like everything that she's trying, so, even the simple act of handing him a drink bottle Like she's got to, get that drink bottle. You're fighting the whole time. Like you're having to wriggle to move little incremental things to try to get all of these bits of, I can only imagine how long it would have taken for her to try to cut his jeans off, for example. Like this is not an easy working environment. There's some challenges here. So she's gone up to have a rest.
It's like a stuck person trying to help a stuck person.
Exactly
you need to you got to get a few people stuck in order to help one stuck person. Like,
yep, exactly. Now, in the meantime, so the team, so there's another rescuer gone down to sit with him. The team are working to solve the friction problem by rigging a pulley system anchored to the tunnel's walls with a series of climbing cams. So those anchors designed to fit into the rocks that you use for rock climbing and all of that sort of stuff. So they're trying to angle the rope on the way down so that it's not rubbing against other rocks so that it, snaps or anything like that. Yeah. They had to push the cams through a thick layer of powdery calcite that coated the cave walls, then string the rope through the attached pulley. After each new cam, they would try the system again. If the friction was still too great, they would add another pulley. Every single step of this was painfully slow. Each trip into the tunnel to pass a piece of gear took nearly an hour.
Oh
so
my God,
they are getting one cam down there, trying to fix it into the wall. Again, we're talking about people lying in all sorts of ways, areas, places, having to get into the wall, attach a cam, try the pulley. Didn't work. Do it again. Like it takes nearly an hour to do all of this. This is it. It just puts into context how serious this is, but also just how unbelievable that these rescuers are to just keep trying. They're just like, it doesn't matter. Let's just keep trying.
Yeah.
As the hours passed, rescuers arrived from all over Utah. The Utah County Sheriff's Office set up a command center and rescue leaders ran through idea after idea. Was there a back entrance to the tunnel? No, it ended shortly after the crack where John was stuck. What about the rescuers who worked on the Grandel Canyon explosion that trapped 6 miners in 2006? They didn't have much advice. Rescuers ordered 6 gallons of vegetable oil to try and slide John out, and they even considered explosives, but they worked out it's not going to work. Like you can't just pour gallons of vegetable oil onto someone who is upside down. Their nose has no protection. Their mouth, like if they could drown him, like if that was the way that they had intended on doing it. Yeah. Drills and chisels arrived throughout the day, but larger equipment was too big to position anywhere near John. The smaller equipment was too slow. And when they tried to widen the rocky corkscrew to prepare for John's exit, it took nearly an hour and a half to drill through 6 inches of rock. So this is a time-sensitive rescue, and everything is taking hours. And John is upside down this entire time. Now, John's wife spent, her name's Emily, she spent the night of November 24th waiting by the phone expecting news that John was free. She had always known her husband of 3.5 years to be persistent and patient. She, knew that she loved John as a 20-year-old Brigham Young University student, but marriage, in her words, looked like a lot of work and not that much fun. Now, she said that with a smile. She took the ring, but then she gave it back, and he waited 2 months until she was sure. They got married, and when she became pregnant, it was John's idea to attend medical school at University of Virginia so that she could be close to her family. So what is the most heartbreaking is that these people they're just beautiful. They're beautiful people, and they have a young family, and that's why I had to take a fair bit of the personal side of it out, because it just was heart-wrenching.
It's not like his name's Aaron Ralston from 127 Hours.
Oh, that's right.
Obviously, I don't want to diminish, but it pissed me off so many elements of that story where it was a stupid person doing stupid things and making mistakes, whereas this family and John making just an honest mistake and being with people and doing everything right, and just you couldn't think of a nicer person. Yeah,
exactly. Now, when the morning came on November 25th, 2009, Emily couldn't wait anymore. She took Lizzie, their daughter, and drove to the cave with John's parents. There she found a hive of more than 100 people talking, planning, and waiting amongst the ambulances, fire trucks, and police SUVs. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s with buzzed hair and a bristle-brush mustache introduced himself as one of the on-scene commanders. We'll get John out. We'll get him out for you, Utah County Sheriff's Lieutenant Tom Hodgson said. He was tearing up, Emily remembered, which confused her. Hodgson knew what the cave could do. He was there 6 years ago when a 16-year-old boy got stuck in the same tunnel that trapped John. It took the crew 14 hours to free him, and the teen spent 3 days in a hospital afterwards. When a second person got stuck at Nutty Putty less than a week later, state officials closed the cave. The cave had only been open for 6 months when John got stuck. So poor Tom Hodgson, Lieutenant Tom Hodgson, he had seen how crazy difficult it was to rescue people. So he's trying to be positive and saying we're going to get him out to the wife, with their young family. And yeah, she was confused as to why he was upset by saying that. But he'd seen it all before, twice. Now, a pulley system did free the 5 7 inch tall, 140-pound teen in 2004, but John was bigger, further down the tunnel, and rescuers could only reach about 6 inches of his legs. So this system that they're trying to work on did work, but that's for someone who was, 3 inches shorter, 60 pounds lighter. Now, back in the cave, each new pulley helped inch John out of his dark prison. The team pulled, they pulled again, but John's feet hit the tunnel's low ceiling, and with his heart struggling to pump blood into his legs, the contact made him scream in pain. So the rescuers came to a horrible realization that the angle of the tunnel meant they couldn't bend John's body backwards without likely breaking his legs. In his weakened state, the shock could kill him, and the cams anchoring the pulleys were slipping from their uncertain places in the wink calcite. So the way that, John is positioned, he's gone down tummy first into this crevice, but because the roof of the tunnel is so low of the, above where he was, to pull him up, there's not enough space to then get his legs to bend backwards to kind of, bring him up safely, because he can't literally push.
Rotate.
You have to rotate to get him to come up back first and his tummy first. So they're literally coming up against every problem possible. Okay, now Ryan Schertz usually feels at home underground. Since he was 4, he spent most of his free time exploring caves and more than once acted as a trapped victim for Utah Cave Rescue, a group that his father had helped found. He was 6'1", and yet he was super thin, he was flexible, and he was seemingly immune to claustrophobia. But when he reached the narrow crevice trapping 26-year-old John Jones in the cave, he had to fight back tears. The simple geometry looked impossible. The crevice was at the end of a cramped tunnel, and rescuers realized hours earlier that trying to get him out is going to, properly break his legs. And John had been trapped upside down for almost 12 hours at this point.
Oh, God. Ugh.
With fluids pooling dangerously in his head and lungs, the shock of the injury could kill him. Now, Ryan, new rescuer, who's been doing this for quite some time and founded a cave rescue, group, as scary and depressing as Ryan felt for John's predicament, he had a job to do. So shortly after he arrived, the rescue crews got a set of heavy-duty air chisels and drills that they would use to rebuild the pulley system designed to get John out of there.
Yeah.
They initially created the pulley system using climbing cams, but the anchors couldn't get a strong grip. So they were trying to find something else that they could use. Now, Ryan would stay with John during this reconstruction effort. When the new system drilled into the rock was finished, the team would inch John up. Ryan would then try to shift John from the 8.5-inch wide side of the crevice where he was stuck, moving him to the slightly wider side of the fissure. So this is, an attempt to try not to break the poor guy's legs. Next, the crew would pull as hard as they could. They had medicine ready to give John intravenously immediately after they freed him. The plan was that, John was that they're going to try and get him out, give him the intravenous drugs, and it was their last best hope. John was starting to lose touch with reality. So a lot of what he was saying at this point was he'd be sort of lucid at one moment, and then the next minute he's talking about stuff that made no sense to Ryan whatsoever, who's down in the cave with him. Now, when Ryan reached John, he loosened knots that earlier rescuers had tied around his legs. He bought a water pouch filled with Gatorade, and he stretched the attached tube down so that John could drink. He rubbed John's legs to remind him that he wasn't alone in there. John said to Ryan, "I'm sorry I'm so fat. It would be so much easier for you guys to get me out of here if I wasn't so fat."
Oh.
Ryan smiled and said, "We'll get you out of here, buddy. And, when we get you out of here, I'll be your workout buddy. How does that sound?"
Oh, God.
So
no body shaming, not even in this scenario.
He's like, "That's right, dude. I'll go running with you once we get you out." Now, Ryan said that John was oscillating between calm, coherent conversation, and then all of a sudden he'd just start thrashing his legs in sheer panic. So he's not having a good time, as you can only imagine.
Yeah.
The best way to bring John back from the, thrashing about, Ryan discovered, was to talk about his family. So John told Ryan about his family, his wife, Emily, and about their life together in Virginia, and about their 1-year-old daughter and the child on the way. The baby was actually due on Ryan's birthday, which was June 13th. So Ryan was talking to John about that. Now, rescue commanders on the surface also knew how much of, talking about his family and stuff like that was going to be helpful to him. So the Salt Lake County crews actually brought in like a telecom, like a set of radios and a line of cable. So they got that down into the cave. And they gave the speaker to Ryan. Lying in the dark tunnel, Ryan stretched his long arm out as far as he could with a little black box. Tears streamed down the rescuer's face as Emily shouted to John from the chaotic surface to the musty, cramped tunnel. "I love you, just keep fighting," Emily's voice crackled through the box. John yelled and Ryan could hear that he was crying. I love you too. Tell Lizzie that I love her. I'll get out and I'll come and see you." When the pulley system was finished, it's so sad. Like, that's why I had to take out like a lot. That's as much as I could leave in there. Like, it's already affecting me, and that's like 5% of what was in the original article. Ooh. Now, when the pulley system was finished, it was 4 p.m. on November 25th. John had been trapped for 19 hours, but the rescuers finally had the power to pull him out. The rope was strung through nearly 15 tandem pulleys drilled into the wall of the cave. Closest to John was a rope that went through a natural arch in the cave wall just above the crack where he was trapped. So Ryan tried to ready John for what was about to happen. And he said, "Okay, John, I need your help. I need you to make sure that you are pushing with your hands." In the pit, so there's the pit at the main entrance, 8 people were working as one, and John's body started to be lifted out of the crevice. So with each tug, he moved a little bit more. Then his feet hit the low ceiling and he screamed. So Ryan yelled for the teams to lower him a little bit, just give him a rest. And then when they lifted John up for the 3rd time, Ryan stuck his head in the crack to give John his first glimpse of another person in over 19 hours. "John, look up at me," Ryan said. "How are you doing?" His face was muddy and his eyes were red from crying, but he wasn't bleeding and his eyes were bright, vibrant brown, so he looked okay.
Okay.
John replied, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down." And then he smiled and said, "My legs are killing me." They let him down to rest again. And after about 20 minutes, Ryan raised his voice and yelled, "Haul." So the rope moved and John inched upwards. Ryan began to hope against the sheer impossibility of all, John might get out. And then Ryan's world exploded in a blast of pain. He screamed and blacked out. When he came to, blood was everywhere. So this is Ryan has woken up after feeling this intense pain. He felt like his jaw was broken and his eye was swelling. Under the pressure of John's body and the crew's pulling, the stone arch above John had shattered and the rope tied around it broke, sending a heavy metal carabiner straight into Ryan's face.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So Ryan is trying to do everything he can and the rope snaps, and unfortunately, yes, Ryan gets smashed in the face with a heavy carabiner, which you can only imagine the sheer force that they would have hit him with being so close. Now, his first thought when Ryan came to is, "Where's John?" The trap man had slid back into the hole and he landed on his head again, but it didn't seem worse than before. So Ryan tried to speak reassuringly that, as well as he could, because his tongue was nearly sliced in half. Like, he's in a bad way. So he says to John, "Look, I'm bleeding. I've got to get out of here. Everything's okay. Someone else is going to come in and help you." Back in the pit, the 8 people pulling the rope crashed to the ground when it went slack. "It was like a slap in the face," said Susie Motola. who she was the first rescuer, our Suze, and she was
Yep.
working on the haul line at this point. Now, Ryan's father, Dave, who was also working on the haul line, he was pretty worried when he saw Ryan come out of the tunnel and saw his face covered in blood. He thought that his son might have a concussion or may have even lost his eye. Like, his whole face was pretty fucked. As the paramedics assessed Ryan and the extent of that damage, Ryan said to, okay, Dad, you go down. So his dad, Dave, and Ryan had created this rescue, so he's got experience. Dave went down and said, John, you're all right? And John responded, I'm going to die right here. I'm not going to get out, am I? And then Dave said, we're going to get you out. And he asked Ryan, John asked about Ryan again and again. Like, is he okay? Is he really hurt? Yeah. Like, John is just the most, I can't. He's just a beautiful person to care so much about someone else when he's in this predicament. Then John fell silent and his breathing slowed. While he waited for a drill to make a new pulley, Dave tried to wrap a rope around John's waist. He lowered himself into the wider end of the crack, but it was too tight to work the rope all the way around John. He asked John to suck in his stomach, but he didn't respond. And then it was Dave who got stuck, and it took him 15 minutes to get out of that crack. When he got the drill, Dave stood in the crack next to John and pointed up, drilling madly, struggling in the damp, humid conditions. He tried to put the pulley in and found the hole was too small. He drilled a second hole and pushed the pulley in. He was exhausted. At the top, Dave pulled Utah County Sheriff's Lieutenant Tom Hodgson aside, and he said, he's dying. He's got a heartbeat, but he can't breathe. And, someone has to try and get down there. So Hodgson, one of the unseen commanders, he was focused on his earlier promise to get John out of there.
Yeah.
So they sent another rescuer down there, Brandon Kowalis. He'd just arrived, so he was a bit more fresh than some of the other rescuers that had been there. And he bought a telecom so Emily could talk to John. So he went down there, spoke to John, and John didn't respond at this point. And Kowalis said that he was already unconscious. And at that point, he didn't wake up. So at 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, a paramedic crawled into the cave and pronounced John dead. Emily couldn't understand how they could know that he was dead because they hadn't found a pulse on his legs for hours. And she was terrified of leaving. She didn't want to leave in case he wasn't dead. But John hadn't moved or spoken or breathed for hours. So it wasn't great. Kowalis said that he had actually heard John dying, which would just be horrendous. And Emily forced herself to get in the car with John's family and leave her husband behind. A soft-spoken man, Hodgson said, I know, it's such a heavy story. Now, a soft-spoken man, Lieutenant Hodgson said he doesn't usually make a promise he can't keep, but unfortunately on November 26th, he had to break that promise, and he picked up the phone to tell the family that the teams were not able to get John's body out of the cave. At first, they reacted with horror. What do you mean you can't get him out? But removing John after his death would be harder than it was when he was alive because he couldn't help them now. He can't move. He wouldn't have been able to breathe in. He couldn't push himself up. He couldn't do anything. So they agreed that they couldn't put the rescuers in any more danger, and the cave would be his final resting place. The crews would seal it with concrete at its main entrance, both to give the family peace and also to prevent another injury. And that is the heavy tale of the Nutty Putty Cave and John Jones, who still rests there, or hopefully he rests. I hope that he is at peace after what is one of the most harrowing events I've ever read about.
Oh my goodness, Kate. I've never seen you so visually react to a story, and you've had to not just research the story and read it over and over, you've had to just retell it. So
yeah,
oh my goodness,
it was just so, it's always like, you and I are so similar. It's the family aspect that gets you, that's what it is. That's such a number one value for us, and it's, I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people, but there's always people that you care about, and then to hear that sort of, them going through that, it's harrowing. So that's why, otherwise I'd be just blubbering through the whole thing had I left the detail that is just, it's so exquisitely told by Lindsay Whitehurst. So if you do want to, put yourself through that, if you want to hear more about the family and what, they were going through, do read the Salt Lake Tribune article. But otherwise, if that was enough for you and that got you like it got me, then you don't have to read it.
No, I think our imagination does enough of the work for us, doesn't
Agreed.
it? Like,
and also the problem was I've just gotten back from like 3 days of just heavy partying and drinking and sports. I'm fragile enough. Why did I choose this?
well, I think it's claustrophobia is such a shared and common and classic phobia of lots of people. And I'm going to say it hasn't turned me off caving. I think caving is such an amazing experience to go through for those that can do it and feel up to doing it. But that's such a ultimate story of just sadness, real sadness, not just for John and John's family, but for all the rescuers. Because you have to remember all the stories that we ever go through and all the things that happen. Even in modern times, it's not just the victims and the victims' families, it's also the people that do all the rescue part of it as well. The trauma and the experience that they go through is just next level.
It takes a special kind of human being to do that, to put your life on the line. Like, it's, for all industries, if you're putting your life on the line, if you're putting yourself in a position to do that for others, like, it's just so unbelievable, so commendable. Shout out to anybody who's in any of the emergency services, any, nurses, doctors, rescuers, holy frioli, like, unbelievable. It's just, it just takes an absolute special kind of human being to do that. And it's, it's massive.
Well, Kate, congratulations. I'm just going to say it. You are hitting it out of the park with your stories lately. I am fully gripped every single week. You killed it last week with Conscious in a Coma, and this week Nutty Putty Cave is just,
it's quite the tale. I'm gonna, do you know what, for my own sake, my next story, this is claustrophobia #1. I'm gonna hit you with a second claustrophobia episode in 2 weeks. However, I will do one of my usual sort of themes where I'll tell like a couple of smaller stories within the one episode. So I'm gonna hit you with that. I'm gonna try and find a couple of silly ones just to break it up a bit, because we all love to have a bit of the light side of it. And I'll try not to make it too much of an ongoing theme where I start to tear up during any of our episodes. That's not really the aim of what we do. So it's a nice little, it shows we're human beings, but at the same time, I was like, why did I do this to myself?
To do a bit of self-care tonight after the story. And same with me in doing the Candyman for the past 2 weeks. Next week, folks, I'm going to do one of my personal serious fears, but it's not life-threatening. It's more of maybe something a little lighthearted. And I'm sure there's a few of you out there that probably share this phobia, because it's relatively a newly discovered phobia or understood phobia, Kate. I don't want to give it away.
No, don't give it away. Leave him hanging.
But I think my challenge next week is to not like dry heave or wrench as I tell this story. So tune in next week. Well done, Kate. Hope you're okay. Please take care of yourself.
No, I'm good. I am good to go. And I'm glad I got to share that story, because, wowee, what a tale.
What a tale. All right. Thanks, folks. Tune in next week. Check out our socials, look into our Patreon, and look out for our Halloween special as well.
Yes. I cannot wait. I'm going to get a drink.
All right. Ciao.
Adios,
Bye.
amigos. Bye. Love you.
Oh, poor Kate.
I'm fine.